Evolution.org Hardcore 2.0 is coming your way. This is episode 163. Today we're talking about overhead pressing dangers by Para Pharma. So this is going to be an interesting one. We're going to talk about different topics. We're going to talk about how common are shoulder injuries when it and how you can get them by overhead pressing. We're going to talk about experiences with these shoulder injuries that a lot of guys are getting and gals. We're going to talk about fixes such as stretching, mobility, importance, and how you should be doing that. We're also going to do the fun stuff. We're going to talk about the compounds which are neutral or can be beneficial for injuries, and we're going to talk about which you should avoid if you've got pre-existing injuries or you're prone to injuries. And then we're talking about Parapharma, why we love them and we really, really enjoy their products. But first, let me remind everyone that we are on Apple and Spotify. Very, very important that all of you listening are supporting the channel. Look, at the end of the day, we can't keep this podcast going if we're not getting the views, we're not getting the likes, we're not getting the comments. We're gonna have to stop the podcast if you guys aren't supporting the channel. So it's very important to give us a review on all our platforms. We get anywhere from 50 to 75,000 views through the Evolution.org website that you're listening to. But let's say you're on your way to work or you're driving somewhere, you can listen to our podcast in the car, and you can also listen to us through Apple and Spotify. We are on there as well, so it's very important to support our podcast, not just listen but also comment, like, subscribe, and do all that good stuff to keep us going if you really enjoy our content. All right, and let's get this started. So let's talk about how common are shoulder injuries. So let's bring in Mobster first. This is his topic,
Yeah,
and then we'll have Noah chime in. Mobster, tell us how common are shoulder injuries in your experience.
I think, Steve, just that anybody that's been onto the forums for more than 5 minutes will see the number of people carrying some kind of injury. And as I said to Steve in the pre-show, the two most common have to be shoulder injuries, Steve, and I would say knee injuries. And I would actually put shoulder injuries slightly ahead. I give guys shit sometimes, and I say, "Why aren't you squatting?" And sometimes it's because they just don't like to. It's a hard exercise. But also they were sometimes I get bit back and I'll say, listen, I've had an injury from sports for years. One of the problems I think sometimes with shoulder issues, and all three of us that are doing this show today have had some kind of back issue or knee issue or shoulder issue, and specifically shoulder issue, is the commonality of either pre-existing medical issues vis-a-vis sports that they've played for years, and then they switched over to weight training, bodybuilding, weightlifting, whatever, the kind of stuff that we like to do in the gym, and you bring that in at the same time. Sometimes we seem to need to learn by making it happen, having literally not listening to good advice, which is the purpose of the show and the reason why we do these podcasts, and almost need to learn the bloody hard way, Steve, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. And then I would hazard a guess that the longer you've been doing this sport, the more likely it is to happen. And let me just give you a couple of examples. And Steve and I talked about this in a pre-show as by way of example. So recently, the last couple of weeks, I saw a thread in a log on the forums and was commenting on this person's performance in the gym, how they're getting into shape, and so on and so forth. And I noticed that the individual that I'm thinking of had done an upper body workout that was relatively high in volume. I'm thinking 30 sets. And because it was upper body, I couldn't see a single exercise that they'd done, Steve, that didn't involve some kind of rotation around the shoulder joint. So I was thinking, okay, so if you do moderate amount of reps, 8 to 12 reps, and you're doing very, very close, this individual is actually slightly ahead of most people. The average is probably less than 20-ish. They were doing 30 sets of 8 to 12 reps, and every single one of those was going to be around the shoulder joint. And the sheer wear and tear, the risk of injury, the inflammation, exercise is inflammation, using steroids is a kind of inflammation. Steve and I talked about this in the pre-show. And then the sheer volume would exacerbate that as well. So you end up in that situation where perhaps the next day or the day after is something else that's around the shoulder joint, and you're almost never giving that joint a chance to recover. So How common is it? I would say it's incredibly common, Steve. If you've been exercising for more than 5 years in the gym, training for 5 years, any of the weightlifting, weight bodybuilding type sports, call it whatever you like. Let's say weight training as a broad description. The chances of you having some kind of niggle or pain, or worse, actually having a proper full blown injury or tear or inflammation or something that's, in Noah's case, for example, actually required surgery is incredibly high. So, what do you guys think on that? How common do you think it is in the sport?
Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
Well, the I'd say it's like based on this statistic, and this isn't with the gym or anything. This is just something that I was looking up just for some information for the show. It says up to 70% of people will experience shoulder pain at some point in their lives, and it is the third most common musculoskeletal issue seen in primary care after back and knee pain. And 1%
Yeah,
of adults are likely to consult with new shoulder pain annually, tendonitis, particularly of the rotator cuff. So I would say, even if you're just an average Joe, it's pretty common just from your 9 to 5 or just wear and tear sports. Mobster said that kind of thing. So us as
yeah,
weightlifters, I would say that's a
got to be
pretty
higher.
statistic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I know for me, like, when I was in my 20s, and a lot of guys are victim of this, we think we're superheroes. Like nothing can hurt us. We could just train us into the ground. It doesn't matter. We don't care, and then one day you're overhead pressing or you're doing some type of shoulder or rotation movement, and then you either hear a pop or feel a snap, like in my situation, and next thing you know, you're out for a year or more, and you just derailed all of your progress by not being smart about your training. Because as Mobster was bringing up, I know I do a lot of volume, and he gets on me about it sometimes in my logs, but 30 sets, that like my jaw dropped when he said that, because I couldn't even fathom doing something like that. So
Yeah,
in my opinion, the shoulders, a ball and joint, something that is
yes, yeah,
super fragile. All it takes is one overextension or one
yeah.
half rotation, and your shoulder is toast.
Let me jump in for a second in there, and I'll use this outside of our sport as well as within the sport. So Steve and I were talking about in the pre-show certain sports that some of our listeners may have taken part in during their youth and prior to hitting the gym as they do now. So I was thinking of some of the athletic sports, vis-a-vis discus and javelin and putting the shot. Um, Even stuff, I think basketball, one might argue,
Baseball for
baseball,
sure.
Steve talked about exactly, being hit on the field playing American football, wrestling, as a lot of the more muscular lifters seem to have done some kind of wrestling at school. And then I was just thinking, for example, and I'll bring Steve in for this as well, certain exercises that are common for us when we go to the gym to get into shape. And as an example, I've written down here a couple. One would be behind the neck pull downs, not unusual, or behind the neck pressing. And there's an argument to be made in certain particular regards. In order to be a great athlete, you need to push the body. So there's certain sports, American football would be a good example. At the professional level, there's a risk versus reward. But for the rest of us, amateurs not getting paid for those sports, professional bodybuilding, there might be an argument if you're making a six-figure salary for doing certain particular things. But those two exercises, and these would be very common exercises for us to do in the gym, the behind the neck pull down and the behind the neck press. If you have the flexibility, and as Noah said, if you're relatively young, you can get away with a great deal. But I think both those exercises, as nice as they are to be able to do in the gym, are over time wreckers of the shoulder. And that's without getting into overextending dumbbell flies, for example, or any kind of fly movement, where we almost want to open the chest up so we let our arms and our elbows drop back even further. Our fist gets below the pectoral, and that pulls the elbow back, so we're hyperextending the joint and so on. Let me just give you some, just the physiology, the actual anatomy stuff. Arthur Jones, when he built the pullover machine, talked about, I believe, a range of movement around the joint of 270 degrees, but it's only in that over the shoulder and then bringing the elbow down and back. It's not, for example, rear delt type workout where you'd have the arm almost and the elbow in line with the shoulder and then try to hyperextend backwards. And something I wrote down in my pre-show notes was what I call partial dislocations. So very common to a great many lifters, and I think again possibly those that are younger and newer to the sport, is allowing your shoulder almost to partially dislocate on pull downs and chins. And I'm just thinking right now as we're saying this, as I'm talking to you guys, of certain movements CrossFitters do, for example, where you're almost jerking
Oh,
that
that's so
joint.
bad. That's so
Yeah.
bad.
So talk about that a little bit
Yeah.
in terms of exercise form, guys. Talk about exercise form
Yeah.
in terms of
So
keeping the shoulder tight and so on.
yeah, so let me say this. I interviewed Frank Zane on the podcast years ago, and one of the things that he mentioned, one of the tips he mentioned when I asked him what are some mistakes people are doing, he said that they overtrain their shoulders, and it made a lot of sense at the time because I had been through that experience, but it didn't make any sense to the 25-year-old Steve, as Noah mentioned earlier, because when you're that age, you feel invincible, you feel like you can do whatever you want. So if you think about it this way, let's say you do a 3 day split or a 4 day split or a 5 day split. And let's say, for example, you're doing a 3 day split, pushing, pulling, and legs. Pushing and pulling split, you're going to be hitting your shoulders, even if you're not thinking or purposely hitting your shoulders. When you do pull downs, when you do rows, when you do on those pull days, and then when you do militaries and inclines on push days, you're putting a lot of pressure on the shoulders. And you're, as Mobster mentioned, as Noah mentioned, you're doing those rotations and you're really tearing up that joint. So what ends up happening is without even you realizing it, you're hitting your shoulders 2 times a week, 3 times a week, and they're a muscle group and they're an area that should only be hit once a week. So what ends up happening is you're going to be overtraining it. Now, when I see that on the forum, I see people saying that they're doing, a pulling split and then they do a pushing split and they're hitting their shoulders both days, and then they're doing a shoulder split. Let's say they're doing a 4 or 5 day split and they hit the shoulders. I'm like, wow, what are you doing here? There's no need to hit your shoulders on a split day because you're hitting the crap out of them on the pulling and pushing workouts. So really, you're overdoing it and you're overstressing it. Now, when we add steroids to the mix, and we're going to talk about steroids in this podcast later on in the podcast, you make the problem worse because now you're getting stronger and now you're adding more inflammation to your body. And that's going to make you even more prone to injuries because you're getting so much stronger so fast or putting so much weight on so fast and increasing your weight so fast. So it's absurd the way we overtrain our shoulders. And as Noah mentioned, statistically, it's the third most prone body part to injuries when it comes to physical fitness. And we see pitchers, we see NFL quarterbacks, they end up with these shoulder injuries, which forces them into retirement. And yeah, it's a tough break. And you wouldn't think it, no one thinks, oh, shoulders, are an injury prone thing, but they're extremely injury prone. So it's very important that you realize that and you have respect for your shoulders, especially when you're young, because you don't want to tear up your shoulders by the time you're 25, 30 years old, or in my case, by the time I'm 35, which leads us into our next topic, experiences with shoulder injuries. And I'll go first. I'll let the guys tell their story, but there was a time when I was, powerlifting and going super heavy, and I was doing crazy amounts on the incline, and I was military pressing 2 plates for reps, and I was
Even your
yeah,
deadlift was a big number for your shoulders, pulling on your shoulders. So
yeah,
talk
I was
about that as
doing
well, Steve.
a sick amount on the deadlifts. I was military pressing. I think I military pressed or 3 plates at one point, and I was
God,
definitely
man.
inclining 3 plates. It was an insane amount of weight. And so one day I was bench pressing and I started noticing my right arm wasn't having any type of strength. Like when I would bench press, like my right arm would be lower than my left. So I was like, this is really weird. I don't know what's going on. And then over time, I started getting inflammation going down my arm. So finally, I went to the orthopedic doctor, and he's like, well, let's do an MRI. So we did an MRI. He's like, yeah, your shoulder is partially torn. And he's like, straight up, he's like, look, if you continue to lift, it's going to tear and tear and tear to the point where you need surgery. He's like, right now, you don't need surgery, but you will never be able to do anything overhead, and you'll never be able to do pull downs. And if you keep doing them, you're going to end up tearing it where you're going to need surgery. Now you're going to be out for 9 months. You're not going to be able to weight train at all. So I was like, shit, this sucks. So that's when it really hit me that, yeah, that's it. The game is over, son. Like you're never going to be able to bench press 420 anymore. You're never going to be able to military press or incline 3 plates. You're done. So I had to go back to lifting, the Planet Fitness style, as Noah talks about, where I could only do light weights going forward, and I had to let my shoulder heal, which took a long time. And even to this day, my shoulder, I don't trust it enough to go heavy. So the probably the most that I've bench pressed since then is probably like 250 pounds, 260 pounds. That's it. I won't go any higher, and I will not do any military presses at all. I don't want to tear up my shoulder again and go through the pain I went through. So, why don't you guys talk about your injuries, shoulder injuries?
Yeah, Noah, jump in there, Noah.
I just feel like as long as I'm doing these podcasts with you guys, that Planet Fitness joke's going to be a running gag and follow me around for the rest of my
Oh,
life with these
for sure,
podcasts.
mate. I get shit with Steve all the time. You got
Oh my God, I'll never escape it. So as far as
you've moved on, Noah, but we're still gonna
yeah,
remember.
yeah, apparently the past is here to haunt me, huh? But so for me, I also want to bring up something too. Like I know we're talking about pressing, but I just want to bring up something real quick. Um, I am a big fan of dips, and I'm a huge fan of weighted dips. And I just want to preface guys to be very cautious with those because it's very easy to overextend at the bottom of the movement and overextend at
Yes,
the top
yes,
of the
yes,
movement.
yes,
And you could really screw yourself up. I would argue if
yes.
you are somebody who does dips, that is one of the most common ways to injure your shoulders. But as far as my surgery, so I actually have my medical history pulled up right here. So basically, this happened. The surgery was on October 21st of 2016. Um, so I have a anchor suit that is 2.9 millimeters, and then I have another anchor that is 12.5 millimeters implanted into my shoulder. I have one laterally in the right because it was my right shoulder. So laterally, I had a tear. And then I had two interlateral tears. So I have a screw that is 7 millimeters and 10 millimeters that is around my bicep area. Um, so if you guys think it can't happen to you like I did, it definitely can because that when I tore that, it was it was kind of weird because at first it just felt like I had a slight pinch, like nerve pain almost, or but it was in my tendon. But I just kept feeling like this like stabbing, pinching motion. And the more I would lift, the worse it would get. And now at this time, I was also doing softball and playing football and stuff like that. Um, I just noticed like it was at one point where like my arm would just go dead and it would be painful and it would just hang and I couldn't lift it. And I was like, okay, well, this is serious. So now I got to go into the doctor and get this checked out. And, at first, like, let's do the whole rehab thing. And I'm thinking in my head, and I expressed to the doctor, I said, listen, if my arm is hanging here and I can't lift it and it's randomly happening and I don't have control of my arm function, I don't think rehab is the appropriate answer for this one. So, long story short, we skipped the rehab. We did imaging, MRIs, that kind of thing. Come to find out, I have two interlateral tears and one bilateral tear in my bicep tendon that leads into the shoulder joint. Now, for guys, your bicep tendon actually comes from your wrist all the way into your shoulder joint. And I had tore that completely in 3 spots. So I really, really screwed myself up. And at the time, I was doing a lot of, overhead pressing, a lot of dips, very, very high volume, guys. And I want to preface this because I love volume. You guys know this. But the problem here is there is such a thing as too much volume. And back in the day, I would do like 10 sets of 20, 10 sets of 10, and my workouts would be 2 to 3 hours long because my mentality when I was younger was I have to go for broke. I have to leave it all in the gym. I need to do everything I need to do and beat myself up. And now that I'm in my mid 30s, that mentality was completely wrong. And I probably would have been further body wise and gym wise if I would have just learned at the time to back off and stretch, because at the time I didn't really stretch. And in the end, I would just go in there. I was one of those guys who'd be like, oh yeah, 2 plates, whatever, let's go. I wouldn't stretch, I wouldn't do any of that. And long story short, I got away with it for a few years, but 2, 3, 4 years in, that's when I tore it. And it was one of the most excruciating pains I think I've ever had, because it would just constantly throb. It was swelling with water. It literally felt like somebody was just repeatedly stabbing me with a knife over and over again. It was the worst
No, I'm
thing.
sorry to interrupt, but tell
Oh,
the
you're good.
listeners specifically about the actual surgery and recovering from the surgery.
Sure.
Don't be afraid to spare the gory details, because I kind of want to scare people into being careful without them
Oh, I
having
get
to
it.
do what you've done.
Yeah, for sure. So this surgery was an hour and a half long, and I know depending on certain people's situations, some people don't have good insurance, some people don't have any insurance. That hour and a half long surgery was $70,000, and I was in and out of the hospital the same day. Um,
Jesus
so
Christ.
yeah, yeah. And also, I actually have the pictures in front of me too. They gave me some nice big Polaroids of
Yes, I've
everything.
seen a couple of those.
Yeah. So basically, there's a few shots of the surgeon with a razor, because he had to shave down parts of my shoulder and parts of my collarbone. And like,
Damn.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then so that was
I think I've seen a couple of pictures where you've got a photograph taken during the surgery. It's in the joint, and you can
yep.
they've took pictures of the sutures of where they were
Mhm.
stitching you up inside, and those are the ones that I remember as being slightly gory in my mind.
So
Yeah,
how much did it cost you out of your pocket? It was
a
70,000 for no insurance.
thousand.
So it still costs you quite a bit of money. That's 1,000 that you.
Yeah.
That's like two nice car payments.
No,
So
seriously, people
yeah,
don't think that's a big deal, but I mean,
yeah,
if you really look at it, like $1,000, like that's still a lot of money. That $1,000 could have been used for
yeah.
anything else in life. But the crazy thing was, like just seeing the rod and the anchor and the bolts and those photos just through my shoulder, because I could tell you guys right now, like I have regained full mobility, but when you compare my right shoulder to my left,
Mm.
my right shoulder is always tight. I can always feel the scar tissue in my right shoulder.
Yes, that's what I was going
I'm
to say. Skin tissue.
yeah, I'm right hand dominant, but my left arm and hand is now stronger than my right arm. And no matter how much I train, this right arm will always lag behind my left and will always
Talk
fatigue
also,
quicker.
Noah, about the sheer, and again, sorry to interrupt, the sheer
No, you're fine.
length of time post-surgery
Ooh,
recovery can take.
that was for me, it was a year.
Yeah.
Um, so the first couple of months, I spent my days sleeping, sitting up against a wall with a pillow
Oh
behind
God,
my
yeah,
head in a sling.
yeah, yeah.
And it was the most humbling experience and depressing experience that I went
Mm,
through, because
mm,
I couldn't shower myself at the time. My
yeah.
girlfriend had to shower me. People had to give me rides places because I couldn't
You were
drive. I
tired all
couldn't.
the time. Never mind anything else,
Yeah,
too, because just sleeping in that upright position.
yeah. And
Yeah.
let's not even mention I couldn't even lift a 1 pound soup can because I would tear the stitches and sutures out of my tendon.
I'm going to be
Uh,
slightly crude here. Something which has occurred to me, and I suspect this might have occurred to younger listeners. Taking care of your own business, and I use that euphemism, suddenly becomes a lot more difficult in terms of one's sexual desire. There's no, to put it crudely, there wouldn't have been much, guys that you're listening to the show laughing, but there wouldn't have been much wanking going on for the sheer fact that he's been in pain, in discomfort, not sleeping well. And I think,
That
and
should scare off, the a lot of the younger guys.
yeah,
Listen, man,
Now they're awake. Now they're
it
like,
was
shit,
months,
I can't watch porn
dude.
and leave.
brushing your teeth, Noah.
I was
Brushing your
basically a
teeth.
vegetable for like 9 months, dude. I couldn't really do much of anything. Like the worst part about it was how humiliating it was and humbling it was. Like, dude, I'm 20 something years old and my girlfriend's having to physically put my pants on. She's having to put
Christ,
my
yeah.
shirt on. She has to
Yeah.
take my shirt off. I can't wash my own dishes.
You're
I can't
kind of
wash my own
disabled. You're
clothes.
kind of
Yeah.
disabled for 12
No,
months.
you know
Yeah.
what? It totally opened my mind and perspective to really appreciate and respect those people who have permanent disabilities, who are on their own and helping themselves, because
And
I didn't realize how stuck I would be.
it's a year. When you're younger, you're 20 something years of age, Noah. And when you're 20, literally 1/20th of your age is going to be spent. That is a mind fuck when you're younger. 12 months, fuck that shit. I'm 60, so 12 months doesn't seem that bad. I have training programs that are longer than that. But in my 20s, being borderline, feeling borderline disabled, feeling that I've got to rely on people, and then saying to myself, young people, when it comes to training PDs or whatever else, they can't get their head around something that's going to take a year because you go, that's too damn long. That's too fucking god. Listen, he's got no choice. Noah had zero choice in this regard. He literally had to bite that bullet, decide it's not that bad really, and mentally get his head around a whole fucking year
Mentally
recovering
horrible.
One surgery. Yeah.
You know, I will say the thing that that I hated the most was having to wear that sling. Like the rehab wasn't even that bad. I enjoyed the rehab. They put me on a pulley system where they like attach it to a cable machine, almost like you'd see at the gym. And basically, I was doing rotator cuff movements, almost like I was throwing a baseball. I would rotate my arm as far backwards as possible, and then completely rotate and go through my body. And the pulley system was pretty cool. They did that quite a bit, and then like moving my arm side to side as far as I could go out, like putting my arm out in front of me and holding it. So basically they did a lot of tendon rebuilding exercises where it was just me holding my arm out or holding it back or up and then
Let
timing
me
it.
just jump in for 1 second here, Noah, because I want to clarify something in terms of people thinking about these things. So when it comes to bodybuilding, weight training, and steroid use, one of the reasons that some people got injured, and I'm thinking specifically of pec tears, is that when we take steroids, our muscular strength and our muscles, specifically, we want our muscles to grow. We want to get stronger. And the reason why some injuries occur outside of what we're discussing in today's show is that your muscle strength, your muscle size grows very quickly, especially when you're training, but especially when you're using steroids. Your tendon strength and your connective tissue, and that includes the fascia, the membrane around the muscle, that growth is slow. It's like a fraction, let's say 1/3 or 1/4 in terms of speed of recovery and so on and so forth. In the gym, post-training and so on and so forth, without any injuries, it's much slower to gain it in strength. So it makes kind of sense in terms of what Noah just said when he said specifically tendon recovery, tendon strength, where the actual stitches and sutures would have been inside the operation, inside the injury. That part is the slower part. The muscles, your muscle memory especially, kind of recovers very, very quickly. But the connective tissue, I mean, for example, we were talking about sutures in the operation for Noah. We've seen bicep tendons, quad tendons, etc. They drill holes into the joint and then they wire into the tendon, and then that is fixed to the joint and you're immobilized to enable the recovery. The muscular recovery is relatively quick. The tendon and connective tissue is slow. And that is another reason why A, it's fucking painful. B, he's had to do the recovery that he did, and the sheer length of time. It's also, I mean, I'll ask you this as well as part of what we've already been talking about. Sometimes with bicep injury and quad injuries, you never quite get the muscle back to the way that it looked before. How has the appearance, and I know this because I've seen photographs of you, so I know the answer, but for the listeners, how has the appearance of your muscle, and again, talk a bit more about the rehab as well. So how did the surgery affect? Can people see scar tissue? Do adults look different post-surgery, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I got lucky. I had a wonderful surgeon, and I had the ability to do arthroscopic surgery, which is very minimally invasive surgery. They basically go in there and it would just minimal. My scars are, I got very lucky because the old school way of doing this surgery, they would hack off half your bicep and you would have this huge, gnarly, nasty scar down your entire bicep. So for any of you who actually are aspiring bodybuilders or competition guys, or you want to maybe possibly go down that road, think twice before you actually mess your shoulders up, because if you hack your bicep, your career is over before it began. So for me, the only thing I have, so if you lift your arm up and you flex, like, like you got your delt and then you have that like little like half circle peak that's kind of like in the shoulder joint on the side of your bicep. So I have a half moon scar there. And then I have 4 different incision scars on the top of my delts. So I got lucky because they healed very well. You would have to be physically almost near touching me to see these scars.
Yep.
Or if I like pointed it out in a photo. But I got lucky because my bicep is still fully intact. And with my biceps being one of my best features, especially when I get lean, I'm thankful that my mistake didn't cost me everything because I didn't decide to compete until much later in life. So
I'm just thinking something else, Noah, for you to
sure.
your advantage in a perverse way. And again, this is something for the listeners in a perverse way. Noah was kind of lucky that it happened when it did. And I
Mhm.
say this because I believe, Noah, you've had people talk about you competing. There's possibly something in the future for you on your
Yes.
radar.
Yep.
And almost I would rather you had it when you had it than have it come up before a competition or when you intend standing on stage. So the perverse kind of way, they having it had it some years ago,
Yeah. That's
it's
my
actually
mentality too. You're
weirdly
spot on.
beneficial. Yeah, weirdly
Hmm.
beneficial that you was able to recover because you were younger. You understand what's going on. I'll touch briefly on myself. So I have had, and again, I think I'm a little bit like Steve in that even now I push stupid fucking weights. And just recently I managed to PB, finally managed to hit 3 plates on the high incline seated press. Just with a slingshot, I've done some ridiculous numbers on bench press, but my bench is about the same as Steve's. My deadlift is nowhere near Steve's. But and again, I just thinking I still do heavy skull crushers. Noah is 100% correct. If I was doing dips now, my body weight or with weight added to me, I would really have to restrict the range of movement because that would really fucking, especially the wider positions, Noah, tear my shoulders up. So a few years ago, and I warm up like a motherfucker now because of it. I had what is called frozen shoulder. When we talked about the commonality, the statistical commonality of injuries outside the gym, being around the shoulder joint, and then of course in the gym, it's even higher as a percentage. Frozen shoulder is quite common in terms of people that paint and decorate, just literally painting up into the ceiling, that kind of stuff. Carpentry work, pulling saws, tool working, and so on and so forth. So most of the manual labouring type jobs, construction type jobs, anything physical, working in a car dealership, fixing cars, this kind of stuff. As well as I say, mine's probably just sheer wear and tear, age, etc., from lifting heavy weights for a long period of time. The thing that fucked me a little bit was so I Googled frozen shoulder and the AI,
Well, you
and
did the
this was
worst
just a
thing
couple
you
of
could have
years ago,
ever done. Google your
well,
injury.
it says, and I quote, 18 months to 2 years to recover. And I'm like, what the fuck? 2 years? And it was almost 2 years to the day in terms of I do things like, for example, I wouldn't say it was 100% recovery. It's probably about 95%. But I will, for example, on benching, pressing, what was I doing today? Chin ups, pull downs, etc. So yesterday, Tuesday's a good example. Seated overhead press. Today was benching, so I did it for bench as well. Seated overhead press. I start with a lot. I'm going to be doing something that's about 85 degrees on the bench in terms of the back upright, and I start just slightly above level, horizontal. Say a few degrees above horizontal, 40 repetitions with a broomstick. I would then incline the bench to about halfway between that and the working position, do another 40 reps, and then I would do 20 reps with just the 20-kilo bar, the 44-pound bar. So before I've even started lifting any weights on the barbell, I've done hundreds or so reps. And I do that religiously now just to enable me to have the range of movement. I do that on bench press days. Today was a dumbbell bench. I'm using a very smart incline, probably about 10 degrees above horizontal. And I still did 40 repetitions with a 1 pound broomstick, a broom handle, just to make sure that there's blood in there, that the temperature in that area is slightly elevated, and so on and so forth. And again, I probably had just a sheer wear and tear. I don't think I did anything specifically that injured it. I did have in the past something that Steve mentioned, and I was able to correct that, where my right arm was so goddamn dominant and I was getting really stupidly lazy with my form that my overhead press, this would be about 8 or 9 years ago, actually longer, 12, 15 years ago. I was doing a barbell press and my right arm would be locked out above my head and my left arm would only be halfway up. I was allowing the right arm to dominate so much that my form went to shit. And I realized I was risking injury. It took me a good few weeks realizing how goddamn stupid I was being. And I literally think took 20 kilos, 44 pounds off the top set, went back down and spent 2 or 3 weeks correcting my form. I was just very, very lucky because that was an injury waiting to happen. So here's the thing before we move into good compounds, bad compounds, etc. The reality of the situation is that we talked about at the beginning of the show. You, the listener that's listening to this show, that's educating yourself on the risk for overhead pressing, and specifically, as we've been talking about today, shoulder injury, you must understand. Noah has talked about a year recovering post-surgery.
Actually, Mobster, if I could interject for a second, you reminded me of something. When you were talking about the 1 pound broom handle, it was actually longer than a year because the year was just the recovery part. But when I went into the gym, I had to start with 2 pound dumbbells, and I can only go down maybe an inch or two at a time. So every week I had to work on
the
forcing
movement,
the shoulder down because I couldn't even bench press. I was doing like an inch or two a week, and it took me a good 6-7 months to be able to fully go past my chest and back up. And my arm, like it was like being a brand new baby. Like, like when a baby starts to walk and they like wobble back and forth,
around,
fall down.
Yeah.
That's how my arm
stabilizing,
was.
No stabilizing.
Nope, gone completely. So you want to talk about embarrassing? People who'd see me in the gym lifting all this weight and being in super good shape and shredded, and now I'm just like a mess and just not where I was. And now I'm like shaking with a 2 pound dumbbell in pain and agony.
Let me ask you to cover this point then. Tell the listener, not just our experience, but say to the listener the lesson here. They do not want to take 12 months, 18 months, 7 months with wobbly muscles, 2 years recovering from a frozen shoulder. We want you, the listener, and I'll get Noah to emphasize this point. We want you to understand the risk. Obviously, we all love training. We love pushing the weights in the gym. You wouldn't be listening to the show if you didn't. But you must understand the time scales here, and you must understand that we don't want to be too negative on this show because the nature of the beast is that we go in the gym and we try to get in shape. But you must understand that there is a risk, and $70,000 surgery, 7 months with wobbly arms, just working your stabilizers, only being able to increase an inch range of movement is fucked up. Talk about a little bit before we talk about good and bad PEDs.
Well, in my experience, I noticed because I deal with shoulder pain every day, just because the scar tissue. Like if you guys don't want that the rest of your life, like I have to deal with, don't ego lift. That's the main takeaway. Like don't lift things that are out of your range. Like who do you have to impress? Who cares? Like, so what? Somebody in the gym saw you for 5 minutes. Big deal. That means nothing when you leave the gym. Like as I got older, I realized I'm lifting for myself. I don't care if it's 10 pounds. Like if it's going to help me progressive overload and I could do it safely, why not work smarter instead of harder? Because I worked harder in my 20s and now I have shoulder pain every day because of it. But as far as good compounds, I would say HGH, definitely a good one. I have a little bit of experience with HGH, and I noticed like just for recovery benefits, like I would feel better, I would sleep better, recovery was a little better. Just basically 2 IUs, nothing crazy, just basically like a health recovery protocol that you'd find just like older gentlemen using is what I found to be really beneficial. And then my two favorite compounds that I have experience with, more so BPC 157 or body protective compound. I have a lot of experience with that, and
so let's start talking about those compounds. Let me just give something as well for me before we get into it. That I really recommend everybody do, and I talk about this on the forum as much as I can. And this is what saved my life was hot yoga. Because when you go into a hot yoga room, the temperature is elevated, the humidity is set at a certain amount, so you're able to stretch and move your body in a certain way, which will lubricate the joints. And as Noah mentioned with scar tissue, as we weight train over time, we develop scar tissue because those injuries that we get, those holes in our joints and around the body, and when we're talking about this, especially the shoulders and our pec muscles and really anything, you develop the scar tissue. So the hot yoga will actually break that scar tissue and
Yeah.
allow the healing process to flourish. So one of the things I always recommend is hitting a hot yoga class twice a week. And that's something I've been doing religiously since my injuries. And it saved
Yeah.
my life. And the guys have talked about, Noah talked about what he had to go through. I had to go through shit. I had problems. I couldn't sleep on my right side. If I
Yeah.
did sleep on my right side, I wake up in the middle of the night, my entire arm would be numb,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't even be able to put it over my head. I
That's
couldn't go to
brutal.
a football game. I couldn't go to a sporting event because it would hurt too much because
Yeah.
of my neck and my spine and the herniated discs I was getting in my spine and my shoulder, the pain I was getting on my shoulder, the numbness I was getting in my fingers. So I had to learn. And one of the things that a doctor told me was hot yoga. He said, go to hot yoga. I said, okay, I'm my doctor. I've done everything possible to fix myself so I don't have pain all the time. Guy, what is going on here? You got to tell me what I could do. He said, go to hot yoga. I said, okay, let me go to hot yoga. I've been spending $90 out of pocket an hour going to physical therapy, okay,
Did they
which
Mm.
prescribe you opiates, Steve?
they prescribed me one, it wasn't an opiate. They prescribed me tramadol, I think it's called
Oh,
tramadol.
because they prescribed me I counted them. I had 360 pills of Percocet that my
Oh,
doctor
Yeah.
gave me. Now listen, I wanted to bring this up real quick because you were talking about the things you were doing. I was just curious from your guys' standpoint with your injuries, if they did that, because addiction is a very real thing. I mean, what we're
Yeah.
doing with lifting,
yes.
we're addicted
Yes.
to it,
Especially
right?
those things.
So
So
when I went to my doctor, they had me pee in a cup because they want to see, because a lot of people that go in there are addicted to these painkillers. So they had me pee in a
Yeah.
cup
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
sure that I didn't have any of it in my system. And then they prescribed me tramadol, which is similar to that. It's maybe a little addictive, but I took it, man, and
It's used by people that like to use coke, Steve, as a
yeah.
way of bringing themselves down here
But
in the UK.
it made my stomach hurt. So I told the doctor, I'm like, I can't take this shit. I was like, I took it for 3 days. I was like, this shit ain't working. Number one, and number three, two. So I started doing. Let me tell you something. I started doing this hot yoga. In the first class I went to, I left that place feeling the best I'd felt in years. That's how good it made me feel because it it basically strengthens your spine. It gets that scar tissue loose and it lubricates your joints. So that's something that you must do. So warming up properly before you hit the gym is crucial. That's something, as
Yes.
Noah mentioned, I was
Yes.
not doing
Yes.
because I had
me
the
neither.
ego. I didn't want to be
Yep.
seen
Yep.
benching the
I
bar
probably
or
didn't back
benching
in the day.
Oh, you're
Yeah. I
so
totally get
soft.
it.
Look at you. You're so muscular, but you
exactly.
only lift 100 pounds. Yeah.
And then
Something very. Yeah.
stretching post workout is crucial every single session. So I see people they do their weights, then they leave the gym. They don't stretch. There's a very few amount of guys that stretch, and obviously they've had to deal with injuries in the past, so they kind of learned their lesson. But if you're not stretching post workout, you are making a huge mistake. So it's very important to stretch and do things like the yoga and even inversion tables are wonderful because they will stretch out your body. So
I
Mobster
will ask
touched on
you
that really
to.
quick. Yep,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
will ask you to a question now because this is something that I've learned, and then we definitely got to get onto the PEDs. So, something I do religiously and have done ever since. Funny enough, I had the same issue with laying on one side or the other with my bench press many years ago, and switched from a wide grip to a narrow grip. And what I started to do at that time, Steve, and I'll ask you both this question, was I started using a joint product from that day, so glucosamine sulfate and other
Sure.
ingredients,
Very
and
popular.
also fish oil was for lubricating the joint. So talk about natural
Yeah.
supplements that you might use before we talk
Yeah.
about
So
epidemics as well.
I'll
Just
let Noah talk a little bit about, but for me, diet is very crucial. So avoiding the inflammatory foods are important, the restaurant foods, the refined oils, the fast food, and then making sure you're getting the good quality fats. So the avocado became a staple on my diet. I was getting a nice fatty Haas avocado. I was I do fishing, so I get fatty fish like mackerel. They're very good. They're high in omega threes. So these were simple fixes that you can be doing with your diet. So take a look at your diet because if you're eating a poor diet that's an inflammatory, it's going to open yourself up to getting injured more. Noah, what are some supplements that you use or diet changes you made?
Well, the actual interesting thing is, like I'm a big fan of N2 Guard. I use that religiously, and a lot of the supplements that you would buy normally and spend a ton of money on, they're included in that entire bottle and in the serving size of N2 Guard. So like back in the day before I found that product, I used to just buy like 15 or 20 different bottles of supplements. Like
Yeah.
it was crazy because like you have all these bottles, you have all this mess, you got to do this whole routine where you unpack the pill, and N2 Guard's so nice because it's just 7 caps, easy peasy. You just take them. But I've noticed, like for me, like collagen is a big one, vitamin
Yes.
D. A lot of people,
Yes.
especially where I live, in the Midwest, with the shorter days, the lack of sunlight, the cold winters, about 90% of people who live where I live are vitamin D deficient. And that plays a huge factor, just mental health and all sorts of other stuff. But Devil's Claw is kind of another interesting one. It's
Mm.
got anti-arthritic and anti-osteoporosis effects. Boswellia, Indian frankincense, basically anti-inflammatory and also has arthritic properties. Magnesium, that's one that I include at least 200 milligrams a day in my diet. And also vitamin C. Like these are a lot of things that guys don't think play a factor, because you're like, most people are like, oh, vitamin C is for immune, vitamin D is for immune, but really it also goes a long way with your joints and a lot of other things. And as Mobster was saying, I do 4,000 milligrams of fish oil daily, as also, and glucosamine, as he said.
Yes.
And the reason I started was just after my shoulder injury. Like I said, like that was the whole reason why I started taking these, because I would notice
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
really bad inflammation in the right shoulder, and I still do to this day. But the supplements definitely help. Staying hydrated helps. Proper sleep helps.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is the type of thing where this will follow you your whole life. And I've had to work 10 times harder in the gym just to compensate for the mistake I made. So
Yeah.
heed the warnings now and do the supplements now. Follow the proper
Exactly.
diet. Veggies, like clean, healthy, whole foods. Skip the processed junk. Get rid of the modified cornstarch, the red 40, the blue one. Like all these things not only screw up your joints in your body and your ability to digest things, but also your mental health, which is a huge one. A lot of people don't talk about that, but like your mental health is everything. And a lot of this stuff,
Just
if you're not eating a clean
just on
diet,
the arthritis, I know that some people suffer with arthritic symptoms, and if they
in the
moderate their
wrist
diet
and
and take
mhm.
foods in and take foods out, they see an improvement, for arthritis, and that can even vary from 1 month to the next. So one food inflames in 1 month, and the next month it's something else. So yeah, let's talk about Para Pharma products. We talked about Noah's talking about HGH at a very sensible dose. Have you? Let talk a little bit about your experience with BPC and TB500, and then we'll also talk about T-Bolt, EQ, Primo, and Deca.
So my experience, the reason I kind of stumbled upon peptides and BPC in general is, as Mobster was just pointing out, I have arthritis in my right knee, and that was diagnosed, I think, almost 4 years ago now, 3, 4 years ago, somewhere around there. So it would make it really hard to squat. And Mobster and Steve, they've both been around my logs long enough to know that sometimes I wouldn't squat because there was just days where I couldn't do it because I would just have such bad knee pain. And so the whole reason why I started using healing peptides like BPC was just to kind of not, I mean, obviously you're not going to get rid of arthritis, and it's not going to be a miracle peptide. So don't get it twisted and think that you're going to inject this and it's just going to heal everything, right? But what it does do is it adds enough lubrication and enough healing to the point to where I can do hack squat. I can go hard on my legs. So it definitely helps. And I've noticed with cardio too, when I on days where I don't do BPC or TB 500, my knee gets sore a lot faster. The endurance in my knee is a lot weaker. But on the days where I do inject it, I could do cardio for 2 hours straight if I wanted to. I can hammer my legs as hard as I need to, and I have very minimal pain. So for me, BPC and TB500 have been amazing just for keeping my arthritis in check. Like it's not going to
Can
heal if
you
it controls it.
can you talk about your dosing, how it's changed over time?
So I actually stick with the same dose, Steve. I just do 500 micrograms once daily for BPC 157, and now that I'm doing a BPC TB 500 combo, I'm still only doing 500 micrograms combined for both compounds, just once a day. And typically my schedule is I like to do the minimally effective dosing. So for me, as I stated in a previous podcast that we did together, these peptides are kind of pricey. I mean, there are certain places where there are good prices, but they don't last very long. So my whole thing is, what is the most minimally effective dose that will also help the vial last longer, but also help me progress in the gym and keep my arthritis in check? So for me, just 500 micrograms 4 times a day. Basically, I do it mainly on cardio days is what I'm doing it, because I know I'm really going to be pushing the knee.
And growth hormone is also a peptide, and all those can be purchased from Para Pharma, as all these steroids we're going to talk about. But Para Pharma, I just have to say, their paratropin is legendary. We have a lot
Yes.
of guys who love their paratropin, and it's very well priced. Noah mentioned how expensive these compounds can be, but I remember a day where you were paying 4 figures for a kit of good quality growth hormone. Even they were paying thousands for good
Well, back in the
quality.
Yeah,
'90s,
and
weren't
we've
they
talked
getting them
about
from
it.
like
Yeah,
AIDS patients back in
Yeah,
the
they would get
'90s?
them
Because
from
it was
saw
AIDS
hard to
that.
get.
patients, and
five
they
hundred
pay.
dollars a month.
Yeah. And so paratropin is very, very affordable. I mean, and
Yes.
you can buy a kit, and really with the growth hormone, you don't have to run an insane amount. I know our Australian friends always run a higher amount of growth hormone, it seems, but the growth hormone, for therapeutic purposes, anywhere from 1 to 2 IU's a day is perfect. So
Yes.
a kit will last you 2, 3 months, no problem, 3 months
Yeah.
or more even. So, and you don't have to necessarily inject growth hormone daily. You could do you can inject it every other day. It's a pulse. So try that out too, and it can not only help with existing injuries, but it can help prevent injuries, as will the BPC and TB500. So those are great peptide options, and they're gaining a lot of popularity
Yes.
over the past couple of years. A lot
I
of
actually
people
have a
are
couple
using.
vials in my fridge still, just for worst case scenarios.
Yep.
There you go.
And I'm getting some BPC as well on the way, that I'm going to be using on some of my various little injuries that pop up every now and then. And so my girlfriend as well. I'm getting her, and it's going to be her first time using BPC because she has some existing injuries from her sport. So these are great compounds. Let's talk about some steroids now. Decadurabolin slash NPP, which is a nandrolone phenylpropy. It's a short
Yeah.
acting version of nandrolone. And Para Pharma has excellent DECA and NPP. And the nandrolone is one of those. It's kind of debatable. I know, Mobster, you're not a big fan of using it for this purpose, but we've seen guys on the forum who have used these products,
Yes.
DECA, and who've
Let me
had
let me
some
jump
great.
in
Go
just
ahead.
sorry to interrupt here, Steve. And I've actually picked on this a little bit, as you say quite properly, by jumping in on a couple of guys on the forum. So here's the reason why. Okay, so based on its reputation some years ago, if you had a shoulder injury, if you had any kind of injury, but let's say the shoulder injury, and you used DECA, you felt better when you was using the DECA or the NPP. Absolutely, right? So I said, yeah, fine. Don't disagree with it. Won't argue it. DECA's one of my favorite bulkers. Regular listeners know when we talk about my favorite PEDs, when we talk about companies like Para Pharma, DECA is nearly always on that list. Absolutely. Right. So that aside, I looked at the reasoning, I looked at the logic, I looked at the protocols, and I said, look, the problem here is, guys, that scientifically speaking, there are studies, I think there's 2 or 3 studies I can think of that I've seen referred to, where collagen synthesis was upgraded, meaning it was better, or more of it was taking place during the time that they were using the DECA or NPP, meaning while you were on cycle, you had an increase in collagen synthesis. But that doesn't continue when you come off cycle. There's another issue, and this is more relevant to shoulder injuries, full stop, and any steroid, but we'll specifically talk about DECA NPP again, and that is this, that your capability of being able to perform while using these products is still quite good. So in other words, if you're using shit form or sloppy form or too much weight, you can continue to do that while you're using DECA. So of course, what we really want you to do is use better form, more warming up, more hot yoga, more joint products, and use the PEDs to enhance your ability to recover. But don't think when you come off that your shoulder joint is healed. It is not. It just felt better and had an increase in collagen synthesis while you're on. Dosage wise, And I'm thinking, I mean, look, all my bulking cycles have been around the same sort of almost 50-50 when I've used it with Sustanon. So, for example, in this example, Stephen, perhaps you can suggest something you could run alongside it. I think Deca for me would probably be circa, again, sensible for most listeners, 300 milligrams. What would you run with that? And perhaps one of our other safe for the
Yeah.
for the
I've seen
inflammatory products.
I've seen like big bodybuilders or power lifters who are going through some shoulder issues. They jack up the dose of Deca like 800, 1,000 milligrams, and it seems to help them. They do that for maybe 4 or 5 weeks and they come back down. So that, yeah, but most of you out there, 200 to 400 milligrams is fine. You can stack it with some testosterone and maybe a little bit of Proviron, and you can see what it does for you. Primabol and Equipoise are a couple of mild injectables from Para Pharma. You can go 300 to 500 milligrams a week with them. They're a neutral option. They're not going to do anything special to heal injuries, but at the same time, if you're training properly and you're doing what you need to do, they won't increase injuries at a crazy clip. And then you got Turinabol, which is a really mild oral that can be run 20 to 40 milligrams a day. It's a great option for those of you who like to do a lot of sports, and it won't screw you up too much. Noah, any comments on some of these steroids and before we get
Yeah.
into the ones to avoid?
Actually, I wanted to speak on DECA because I actually have a story about that. So I know I was listening to the previous episode and you guys were talking about like TRT in clinics and how they rake you over the coals and stuff price wise. I actually have a story. I never ended up using it, but I originally was with a clinic years ago with my TRT, and the doctor was like, "Oh, well, you have joint issues, this and that. You should try DECA." So I'm like, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." So I ordered it. Let me just tell you guys right now. I'm looking at the Para Pharma website, right? You can get Deca 300 for $58 a vial, right? A 5 ml vial of Deca through a clinic cost me $300. And do you guys understand at 200 milligrams a week how fast a 5 ml vial goes? Like, I just want guys to understand when you use a quality source like Para, the price is always right. Like compared to what I was getting charged at a clinic for Deca, three hundred
Yeah.
dollars for a
We
5 ml is absolute
We're
insanity.
absolutely blessed. Mobster and I talk about it a lot. When Mobster and I first started using steroids, how much more expensive steroids were and how the availability was. I can remember,
Yes.
I mean, you weren't just able to get what you wanted back in those days. You had to get what the source had or your buddy at the gym
Yes.
had, and whatever they wanted to charge you, you really couldn't, there wasn't like any competition. So we're already blessed if you come on the forum and you check out Para Pharma and you see the different things they have, Para Pharma. We really are blessed. Let's talk about some of
Uh,
the ones. Go ahead. Mhm.
Especially with Primo, in my opinion. I
Oh
love
yeah,
Primo.
Primo. Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah. Let's talk about the ones you should avoid. In Trenbolone, I have a personal hate for
Nope,
Trenbolone
never.
because I was on Trenbolone when I blew out my shoulder. That's when I was benching over 400. That was when I was military pressing 3 plates. I'd have people in the gym be like, "Dude, do you need a spot?" They're like, "Dude, you've got 3 plates on there that you're military press. Do you need?" Like they're in shock. And I'm like, nah, bro, I'm good. If I need you, I'll let you know. And they're like looking at me like, what the hell? Like, what the hell's going on with this guy? They couldn't grasp that a little 5'6", what do they call them? What are they called? Hermits? What are they called? Trolls or whatever, could do that much
A
fucking weight.
manlet.
Man, yeah, some was he couldn't grasp it. And I went in there and I'm like, boom, boom, boom. But it's the trend. The trend makes you do an insane amount of weight, more than you could ever do naturally. But in the process, it also fucks you up. You're going to get a lot of fucking injuries in the process. So trend is the one to avoid. And I've not touched trend since my injury. And if I were to get on trend and start going in the gym and throwing heavy weights around, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to end up like Noah, and I'm going to end up with rods inserted into,
This
into my
guy.
shoulder,
This guy.
screws and all kinds
Yeah.
of.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you, Steve. Steve's talked about this on other shows, so I'm going to bring Steve in for this as well, and talk about Winstrol. One of
Oh
the
my
issues with
God.
Winstrol, yes, I'm going to ask you this as well, Steve. One of the issues with Winstrol is it's a fantastic dryer of your
Yeah.
physique. Steve will tell you graphically, listeners, specifically how his elbow and or shoulder joint felt when he was lean,
Yeah.
in shape and dry or windstorm. Talk
Oh
about
my
that
gosh.
crinkly
Like just like
sensation.
when you're doing a bicep curl, it feels like you got a rubber band in your joint and it's like pulling the rubber band. It's like someone's pulling a rubber band one way. It's just tears your joints to shreds. So if you're going to do Winstrol and you've got joint issues, you're going to have problems. So you want to make sure you're doing what Noah said earlier, taking those supplements, you're eating your good omega-3 fats and all that stuff. But Winstrol
Yeah.
is one to avoid, as is Masteron. Masteron is a great hardener, and you're going to
Yeah.
harden up your muscles. They're going to be like rocks. So, yes, they're going to increase the chance of injuries. Anadrol as well, I throw that in. Very androgenic compound. It's also a DHT derivative. So, it does everything that you don't want to happen. And I've seen people run Anadrol for 4 or 5 weeks and completely blow up their strength and size so fast, so fast. That's another problem. These steroids that increase your strength and size so
Yes.
fast
Yes.
will
Yes.
cause injuries because your body can't handle it. Your soft tissues can't handle it. It's a cliche that a lot of people don't understand, but it's true that when you improve your strength rapidly or increase your weight
Yes.
rapidly, it's going to
Yes.
strain your body and something is going to break. So these are steroids to avoid if you are worried about injuries or if you have existing injuries. Just avoid these steroids and stick to the ones we mentioned before. And a lot of guys are stacking the BPC and TB. Noah
Yes.
is. A lot of these other guys are doing
Yep.
this. A lot of our Australian listeners, a lot of our American and Europeans, they are doing this because these, and the growth hormone as well, because these will help not only prevent injuries but also help with existing injuries that you have. And these are really smart choices. So as more people use them, people are going to have more experiences to report.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to be careful. Like I might really deploy heavy use of BPC and TB 500 because, as Steve was prefacing just now, steroids to avoid. Don't be like Noah. Don't do what Noah does because Noah is gonna run Winstrol and Masteron with the testosterone his next cycle, and he already has shoulder issues that he deals with. Like I'm rubbing my shoulder right now and all I feel is a big knot of scar tissue that's painful to the touch, and it's happened ever since my surgery. So, like I said, listen to Mobster, listen to Steve. If you guys have issues, don't do what I'm doing. I'm only doing it purely for competition purposes, and I know when I run those, I'm going to severely back off, I think, on volume and on weight. So if you guys are going to run it and you already have joint issues, just don't. Because I could tell you even now, like just doing bicep curls, like you guys were mentioning, Steve, just now, um, even though my tendon is fully healed and it's been repaired for years, every time I curl with my right arm, sometimes I'll feel a snap in my forearm, and it's the bicep tendon that was repaired. Like it's just like feels like a like when you ever get static, you rub your hands, you touch carpet or something, you get that small shock. Sometimes when I'm doing the curl and I'm getting to the peak and back down, I could just feel a
It sounds
snap
like
in my
scar
forearm.
tissue's rubbing over a nerve ending, and that's what you're,
Yep,
that pinging
yep.
sensation of the nerve pinging.
Yep. So that's another thing. If you don't want to deal with that every day, which is the most annoying thing when I'm doing bicep curls, because it only happens when I'm curling, don't mess your shoulder up. Don't ego lift. Don't do stupid things. Be smart about it. Train smart, not harder.
Steve, I'll talk a little bit now about Para Pharma generally, but I'll just finish the whole section that we've been talking about. Look, guys, as I said earlier on, you do not need to learn the hard way. If you have got injuries, hopefully there's some takeaways information from what we discussed today in using the Para Pharma options of the easier PEDs versus the harsher ones. It's very simple terms, and it would take a whole nother show to talk about the inflammatory response that's given to you by using steroids, by training, by some diet options. In simple terms, those drugs that help you get lean and or hard will exacerbate pre-existing injuries, dry you out, and dry out the connective tissue and the soft tissue that Steve referred to. And the ones that bulk you up will not. But unfortunately, the bulk you up ones will also sometimes enhance your strength. And again, strength, muscle size, etc., grows quicker and happens quicker than the connectives and soft tissues recover from training. So you need to be aware. There's a balance. When I come to the strength training type stuff, I do when Noah gets into competition shape, when Steve was benching 400 and pulling 600 plus, look, the reality of the situation for that is these things are temporary. But I aim for specific peaks of strength. I might do that once or twice a year. Try to get my squat as high as I can once or twice a year. What I will back up, or back off, should I say, to poundages that, while incredibly respectful, still very high, aren't going to be the kind that will fuck me up. The real big numbers will fuck me up if I'm not careful. Look, we talked about some of the products from Para Pharma, and growth hormones is a great example, Steve. In real terms, products by companies like Para Pharma are cheaper than they've ever been. Availability is better than they've ever been. And when I look at the Para Pharma website, I'm looking for things like the sheer length of time that they've been in business. I believe it's 14, nearly 15 years, Steve.
Really
you go, one of the things I talk about is the cross forum. We have a family of forums associated with Evo, but I say Para Pharma, I've seen on other company forums, other sponsored forums, people nothing to do with the Evo family. And when a company starts to cross the whole landscape of PED type forums and is well respected again and again and again, there are companies that come and go. There are companies that are great one year and disappear the next. Para Pharma is cross forum, loved, has been around a long ass time. You don't get to last nearly a decade and a half in any business, but specifically when it comes to PEDs, without being a trusted source. Prices, as Noah said, and as I've said, have been absolutely fantastic, and in real terms are better than they've ever been. The sheer number, I think, without me even looking at the Para Pharma page, Steve, is 45 different products. Companies like Para Pharma and others listen to the customer. They have blends on their site which save you stacking. They have the peptides that we've talked about that will help you with healing. They understand that the crazy motherfuckers like you, me, Steve, and the listeners are going to go out there and are going to push our bodies. We don't want to be normal. We want to be in shape. And companies like Para Pharma are helping you do that. Talk about that briefly, guys, before we get into the disclaimer.
Yeah, I have a fond respect and love for Para Pharma. Actually, I've got my introduction into steroids and running logs was both with Para Pharma. My first 2 ever cycles, I did testosterone and Primo from Para, and I have blood work on this stuff, so you guys can see it's legitimate. I've got hundreds of replies on my logs. I've gone in great detail about Para Pharma. So anything that you would like to know about Para Pharma, if it works, how it is, how it's dosed, you can find it in my 2 previous logs. And my favorite would probably be like the 200 milligrams a milliliter Primo. Like, it just, the Para Pharma Primo is amazing. Like, before I started my cycle, my estrogen was 53. And then once I got into cycle and the Primo kicked in, 6 to 8 weeks later, my estrogen went down to 16.7. So their Primo's legit. I know it's legit because I didn't use any AI. I know guys sometimes are worried about underdosed or fake Primo because it's one of the most fake steroids in the world. But when you go with Para Pharma, you can guarantee high quality, great gear at a great price, and it's legitimate in my experience. I have nothing but great things to say. The ordering process was hassle free. Working with the reps was hassle free. Everything about my experience with Para Pharma was just spot on, hassle free, which is something that I've grown to really appreciate because it's not always the case sometimes. That's why a source like Para Pharma is truly coveted, because when you go with them, you're getting quality, you're getting quick service, you're getting reliability, and you have people there that can help and answer questions at any time when you need it. So that's why I love Para.
Steve?
That's it, buddy. Yeah, Para Pharma. Check them out. Come on the forum and check out Noah's log. Check out my log. Check out Mobster's log, and join in and do your own log as well. And if you use Para Pharma, post up a touchdown. We'd love to hear from you.
Definitely. I've run a log on it, guys, so check all 3 of us out. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. Our view is based on our experience and views on the topic. Our podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.